Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is a closer look at seraphim. I decided to do this video on seraphim today just because I was looking for something a little bit lighter and because I shared a video, I believe last week, on the cherubim, and I have been reading the appendices to the Chronicles of the Nephilim series by Brian Godawa, and it's called When Giants Were Upon the Earth, and it shared a lot of really interesting facts about cherubim, and there's some really interesting facts about seraphim too, least of which is that just like the cherubim, there are depictions of what certainly seem to be very similar to seraphim in other cultures as well, not just in the Bible. So let's just take a look at that. Isaiah 6, verses 2 to 7 is where we get the biblical description of this, what is described as angelic being. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people with unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. Let's take a look at the Hebrew meaning of the word seraphim, which is actually the plural for the word seraph, and it's number 8314 in Strong's Concordance. And if we look here down at Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, it says fiery serpent or seraph. And I have no idea what that sound just was in my kitchen. Anyway, so from seraph, burning, figuratively, poisonous serpent, specifically a seraph or symbolical creature from their copper color, a fiery serpent. If you are familiar with the story from Numbers 21, where the Israelites in the wilderness, they were grumbling, and God's punishment for them was to send upon them fiery serpents. And if you notice here in this depiction, it's very interesting. They look like, normal snakes, but they have wings. So in many cases, they're actually fiery winged serpents. Numbers 21:6 says, Then the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many people of Israel died. And then in Numbers 21:8, it says, And the Lord said to Moses, Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. Now, I want to point out to you that there is a difference in the Hebrew words, at least in this lexicon, that are used for fiery serpent. So if we look to the Hebrew in Numbers 26 for the fiery serpent, and this is the poisonous snakes or the fiery serpents that the Lord sent upon the grumbling people, it says he sent poisonous snakes. Okay. Now, if we look, it's Strong's 5175. It means a serpent. But this time the word that was actually used was nakash. And nakash is actually the Hebrew word that was used for the serpent in the Garden of Eden. So you might be wondering, okay, well, we just looked at the Hebrew and in that it said poisonous snakes. And here it says fiery serpents. Here it says poisonous. Here it says venomous. And if you remember when we did look at the Strongs for this, it did also say that it could mean poisonous. So those are also possibilities. But what I found the most interesting is that the word that was used for serpents here was not seraphim, but was nakash. But then if we go 2 verses later to Numbers 21:8, the seraphim that was set on a pole, and I already gave it away, it's a fiery serpent. You go to the Hebrew, and it comes from the word seraph. Strong's 8314, that number or that word that we just looked up. So interesting. So I don't know if there is a connection or not, but it seems that the nakash word was used when these serpents were doing something evil, such as the serpent in the garden was the nakash. But here we have this fiery serpent being placed on the pole for people to gaze upon so that they can be healed. So it was being used for good. And in that case, the word seraph was used, or seraphim. So I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but I'm wondering if maybe that's why there's a difference between nakash and seraphim. The words fiery serpent are also used in Isaiah 14:29, and that says, "Rejoice not, O Philistia, all of you, that the rod that struck you is broken, for from the serpent's root will come forth an adder, and its fruit will be a flying fiery serpent." So in this case, we certainly see that there is a negative connotation to this flying fiery serpent. So let's just see what word is used for that. And from the serpent's root, so that's nakash, and it's speaking of the serpent in the garden, a flying seraph. So in that case, it is using the word for seraph, burning poisonous, a seraph, symbolical creature. So it starts with nakash, and then in the next time that it's used is seraph for the flying serpent. Okay, so maybe my original theory is not correct. Isaiah 30, verse 6, an oracle on the beasts of the Negeb, through a land of trouble and anguish, from where come the lioness and the lion and the loud car outside, the adder and the flying fiery serpent. They carry their riches on the backs of donkeys and their treasures on the humps of camels to a people that cannot profit them. So, just out of curiosity, I want to see what word is used. I don't know that it really matters, but and here it is, Strong's 8314 again. So coming from the word seraph there as well. What you may have noticed, though, is that the seraphim that we first read about in Isaiah 6, 2-7, when it is specifically translated as seraphim and not as fiery serpent, is actually talking about some sort of heavenly being. Whereas when we read about it in Numbers and Isaiah, even though they're coming from the same word, there it seems that they're talking about fiery serpents, an actual reptilian creature. The fact that they both come from the same word, however, does make you ponder, is there something that is serpentine about the actual seraphim that are referred to in Isaiah 6? And in the book When Giants Were Upon the Earth by Brian Godawa on page 142 to 143, he says, some deny this serpentine essence by pointing out that the Isaiah seraphim are described as having human heads, wings, hands, and feet. But Karen Randolph Joines has persuasively argued that the Egyptian winged uraeus, or upright cobra, that guarded the pharaoh's tombs, I have that right here, and thrones with its fiery venom, is demonstrably the equivalent of the Hebrew seraph. Like the seraphim in Isaiah, the uraeus was also commonly described as having a human face, wings, hands, and feet when it was necessary for it to accomplish tasks like those of Isaiah 6, but it remained a winged serpent. So that is very interesting that we have a parallel between this upright cobra or this other fiery serpent in ancient Egypt that is able or that can attain or can manifest a human face and human attributes when it needs to have them, but at other times it remains a serpent. And so then it does make you wonder, is that the case with the seraphim that is described in Isaiah 6? Another thing that this really makes me think of is this depiction. Actually, first of all, before I even get to that, if you remember, if you saw my cherubim video, you would see that the cherubs, they seem to have a lot in common with the sphinxes around the world. And what was the sphinx in ancient Egypt? It was a throne guardian. And here now we have the seraphim that seems to have many of the same duties as, I'm sorry, the uraeus of ancient Egypt seems to have many of the same duties as the seraphim of the Bible. So we have these parallels between the Bible and ancient Egypt. And so it just makes you wonder, there are so many possibilities for what this could mean. It could mean that these beings were everywhere and that they did, have the same sorts of duties and responsibilities. It could also be that they were coming from the same stories of, what we have of these seraphim in the Bible. Possibly these other cultures also had their own versions of what they thought they were. I always think of this painting here of the Tua de Danann in Ireland, and they're thought to be the Fae. And the Fae is where we get the word fairy from. They are elven. And as I mentioned in one of my other videos about this a while ago, I'll try to link it in the description at the end. They are said to be Nephilim, like the Fae, the elves, even the dragon bloodline that Vlad the Impaler is said to be a part of. They are all said to be from the Nephilim bloodline. But what I really find interesting for today's video is, I don't know, you may have noticed it already, but here, just as we have this uraeus symbol on the headdress of the pharaoh, on this painting of the Tua de Danann, we have this serpentine figure here as well. So is there a connection? I don't know, but that's what it made me think of. Now, regarding this, Dr. Michael Heiser, who was an expert in ancient Hebrew and was also an ancient Near East scholar, he had this to say about this topic. Seraphim then, and this is also from the book, by the way, seraphim then are reptilian serpentine beings. They are the watchers, the watchful ones, who diligently guard God's throne, which is carried by the cherubim, who may also serve as guardians. There are good serpentine beings, seraphim, who guard God's throne. So Isaiah 6 is seraphim. And there are fallen, wicked serpentine beings, also called seraphim, who rebelled against the Most High at various times and who became the pagan gods of the other nations. Him saying that these are the watchers, it made me think. The watchers are the ones that, according to the book of Enoch, which is not canon, but I'm just going to bring it up here, and many associate them with the sons of God of Genesis 6. It makes you wonder if that is what actually happened, that these watchers, these seraphim, as Dr. Michael Heiser said, went in to these human women and took them for wives, as many as they chose. I just have to think. I'm assuming that they would have assumed their human form at that time, but did they have serpentine features at the time? And I don't know. I always wonder, did these women even know what they were? I'm assuming they did. I mean, they must have after a while. But at first, when it first started happening, did these women know what they were getting into? Did these watchers, these seraphim, even though they had the human form, did they have reptilian features at all? It's interesting because Gary Wayne, who also has done a lot of research into the Nephilim, he has shared so many resources that seem to describe from ancient documents that the Nephilim also had serpentine features. They were actually described as looking like vipers in some cases. And I think I actually mentioned that in some of my old videos too. I don't do stuff like this much anymore, but I used to all the time. And I know that I talked about that in my other videos. But anyway, and so when he said that they became the pagan gods of the other nations, these fallen seraphim, that's something that we have heard about. I mean, who has ever heard of Quetzalcoatl, which is, I believe, from Mexico, and I found a neat article about that. Yeah, so the fiery flying serpent has cultural significance in various cultures around the world. In some cultures, it is seen as a symbol of evil and danger, while in others, it is seen as a symbol of power and strength. In Mexican mythology, the creature is known as the Quetzalcoatl, a powerful and wise god who was revered by the Aztecs. In Hindu mythology, the creature is known as the Naga, a powerful and wise serpent who is often depicted with multiple heads. Overall, the fiery flying serpent is a mythical creature that has been mentioned in various ancient texts and has cultural significance in many cultures around the world. Its ability to fly and breathe fire, sounds like a dragon, has made it a formidable opponent in myths and legends. Here is actually the video on top is one of my old videos. It says a year ago, but it was definitely more than a year ago that I made this one. Naga, Nakash, and lizard people under Los Angeles. And I'll link this one. Well, I always link the whole Question the Narrative playlist, but I'll try to put a thumbnail for this at the end of the video if you wanted to click right on this and watch this one, because I did get more into the Naga and the Nakash in that video, in case you're interested. While the fiery flying serpent is often associated with biblical texts, it has also been mentioned in other ancient texts. In Egyptian iconography, the fiery flying serpent is depicted as a winged serpent with a fiery breath. The Greeks also had a similar creature known as the dragon, which was a winged serpent that breathed fire. Despite being a mythical creature, the fiery flying serpent has captured the imagination of many people throughout history. So, actually, regarding what Dr. Michael Heiser had to say about these fallen seraphim becoming the pagan gods of these other nations, that could also very well be where these similarities between the seraphim of the Bible and then the Uraeus, for example, or the Drakon, I'm not sure how to say it, I'm sure that's where the word dragon comes from, of Greek mythology, that could have been from their own pagan gods. So, and I think that's more likely now that I think about that. But anyway, I'm just going to read where it says religious context. The fiery flying serpent is a creature that appears in the book of Isaiah in the Tanakh. The term translated as fiery serpent, seraph, appears elsewhere in the book of Isaiah to signify the seraphim, the singular form of which is also seraph. In the Bible, the serpent is often associated with sin and temptation, as seen in the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. However, in some contexts, it is also associated with healing and protection, as seen in the story of Moses and the bronze serpent, which was in Numbers 21. Besides the Uraeus, there's another fiery serpent, lowercase g god, of ancient Egyptian mythology called Denwen. So that says picture facing a god who is about the mix of making things and tearing them down, a figure both impressive and magic-like. In Egyptian mythology's big and detailed story collections, there is Denwen, known as a fiery snake god, whose characteristics are interesting and complicated. And he was a fiery serpent god in Egyptian mythology. He symbolizes both creation and destruction through his fire. His worship was popular during the Old Kingdom period. Temples and groups dedicated to Denwen existed in ancient Egypt. So there we go, pagan god. Denwen is unique among snake gods for his fiery characteristics. Archaeological findings include statues and carvings of Denwen, and over time, worship of Denwen declined due to changing beliefs and cultures. So I'm going to leave a link to all of these articles in the description, and I always leave links to all of the Bible verses that I use as well. But I'm pretty sure that I shared with you everything that I wanted to. Actually, no, there was one more thing that I wanted to share with you from page 143 of When Giants Were Upon the Earth. It says a text fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls affirms the ancient Jewish understanding of watchers having this reptilian presence and ruling over specific peoples. And from the fragment, it says, I saw watchers in my vision, the dream vision. 2 men were fighting over me. I asked them, who are you, that you are thus empowered over me? They answered me, we have been empowered and rule over mankind. They said to me, which of us do you choose to rule you? I raised my eyes and looked. One of them was terrifying in his appearance, like a serpent, his cloak many-colored yet very dark. And I looked again, and in his appearance, his visage was like a viper. Sounds very similar to what I was saying that Gary Wayne had said the Nephilim, the children of these watchers, had looked like. And from that quote that I just read, that certainly sounds like the beginning of these serpentine pagan gods. So I think that's it then. It actually is. So anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.